No separation exists between us and books. Simulating oneness, this program analyzes, reviews, and breaks down books across all genres through a conscious lens. Synergizing literary theory, philosophy, psychology, spirituality, and the occult, Conscious Book Reviews co-creates a new literary consciousness transcending objective interpretations. What's up, everybody? This is Ian, aka The Renegade Writer, here today to discuss and do a conscious book review on Sherman Alexie's The Absolutely True Diary of a Part-Time Indian. And here on this channel, we are not going to shy away from covering controversial authors or books or styles of thinking. Sherman Alexie in 2018 was revealed as a bad person because many women came forward with allegations of sexual assault and misuses of power, and they seem to be 100% legitimate because he even admitted to wrong behavior even though he didn't admit to certain allegations. And before that, in certain Native American lit classes I had in 2016, my professors refused to teach Sherman Alexie, and they said that other colleagues they did too didn't teach him either because he just has a interesting reputation in the Native American, lit community. For instance, Sherman Alexie came to speak at one of these professors' old universities he was studying at, and was apparently very late, rude, disrespected some elders in the tribe by saying that they didn't maybe know what was going on. That's like the basic story. Just a somewhat rude and brash person. But we are analyzing literature here. We are analyzing and flowing with trends of the imagination, not with things that are happening outside of that. And we can, and things are, of course, we're not going to cover the mass murderers and stuff, but we are, and we can look at it through psychoanalytical lenses and all these other things. You can't shy away from this stuff. So to start off, I'd like to quote Sherman Alexie. He says, "There's so many ideas about Indians, none of which we created. Forgive the immodesty, but I think it's much more important for an Indian like me to be in the New Yorker magazine than it is for me to be, or an Indian to be in a museum so that we can join the culture rather than become a separate part of it." And that's one of the big pushes in all marginalized community is the renunciation or the changing of the false narratives. For instance, the narratives about Native Americans have been happening since we got here, they're going to kill us. I mean, the killing narratives, the savage narratives, that's where it started. But then it turned into the Native American will steal something from you, or even the positive narratives like the noble warrior, or now, and in recent history, there have been more positive narratives, but they have actually been played in whitewashed ways. For instance, in media for a very long time, even up till now, Native Americans are played by white people or, someone who isn't a Native American. And that has caused a lot of issues. I mean, with other races, if you do that, if, you blackface or something, that's wrong. But for Native Americans, still Johnny Depp did it. And I can't remember what movie, but multiple times this has happened even in the last decade or two, and it continues on. And of course, there's modern myths and narratives about the reservation, and some of these narratives have some truth to them. A lot of narratives have at least a little bit of truth to them, but every race, every group of people deals with these narratives, and of course they aren't true. This is fear propaganda used to create a certain goal. So that's just the first thing, everybody, and I hope that I share what I know and have researched and can clear up and present a very clear and positive narrative about what's going on with this book. So this book is written in a diary format, and I think as an author or as a reader, it's a pretty good choice to write in a diary format because it turns into some meta intertext there's a intertextual relationship created with the text, because this person is speaking to himself but then also speaking to us. There's a private sense to us. The narrator is actually conscious of the narration that's happening because it's their diary. And we've seen many popular, a lot of stories that are not even stories, or non-fictional accounts that have been very popular in the diary format. Of course, the classic one is Anne Frank's The Diary of a Young Girl. Then we have The Many Minds of Billy Milligan by Daniel Keyes, which is about Billy Milligan's the first person to ever get off of a court sentencing for split personality disorder. This was a big case back in the day. He, I think, raped somebody, and there was a full court case. Very interesting book about how this psychoanalyst helped him reattach and combine his personality again. Then, of course, Maya Angelou's I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings. That details the first, we'll say, 17 years of her life. I think she has 3 or 4 autobiographies, but this is the first part, and beautiful book. Recommend everybody read it. Oops, that should not be there. Then we have Notes from the Underground, aka My Two-Thirds by Fyodor Dostoevsky. I mispronounced that. My bad, everybody. Great book. It gets into mania and trauma and a lot of other things. Once again, a narrative diary form, though. Oh. We have Lame Deer, Seek Your Revisions for Native American. This is a pretty good one because Lame Deer experienced a lot of the culture in the sense that he was raised Native American, went through vision quests and stuff as a young man, but then he got sent to the horrific Native Indian boarding schools system. General Pratt, his motto, kill the Indian, save the man. And so he gets out of that and then, integrates himself into the Western world and into showmanship. And it's a good story, but it's written by Lame Deer. Then, of course, another Native American narrator, not writer, but One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, won an Academy Award for Best Picture. But the novel is different from the movie in the sense that it is from the point of view of Chief Bromden, the Native American narrator. And very beautiful book. Recommend that to everybody. Black Elk Speaks, another. Ernest Hemingway did narrative diaries, but they were semi-fictional. All of his short stories, if you get the complete short stories of Ernest Hemingway, a lot of those are actually autobiographical. And there's a lot of, books out there, a lot of Hemingway scholarship that I'm really into that details all that. And Hemingway, once again, is a controversial figure. Misogynist, rough rider, not the nicest guy, but beautiful writer, and you can't really replace him with people in his time period for what he was doing. I mean, you can look around, but certain people do certain things and they require analysis because they can help us now become better. They can help us now, understand the evolution and where things are going, and then maybe change where things are going. So the core of this, one of the core tenets of this text is that the relationship with Arnold Spirit, the protagonist, Arnold Spirit, who is in 8th grade and he then moves into 9th grade, and his relationship of going, first of all, on the Spokane Indian Reservation, which is in Washington. And he says it's 22 miles from the town of Spokane. Cool. And I'm sure when this seems to be taking place in the 90s, 2000s, early 2000s, like the text. And Spokane is maybe not so much anymore, but a conservative place. It's a place where, it's in eastern Washington. It's out kind of in the boonies, even though there's a lot of people. There's for sure, if you ever have been there, a conservative vibe to it. And, as we know, can be problems when, rednecks and Native Americans or just, closed-minded people are exposed or around other closed-minded people. I experienced that in college with people who lived on or near Native American reservations. They had not very kind things to say about them. And I think most of it was from not firsthand experience, because I'd be like, well, what'd they do? Like, how many do you know? Like, and that's how you blow through a lot of these narratives. You actually have to ask what you know and what's going on. And my experience, if we're going to be talking about the reservation, is not very much. But I have been and stayed on reservations with friends in the Hopi Reservation and the Navajo Reservation in Arizona, and have visited other ones and have just done some general reading. So once again, do I know for any firsthand experience? Not really. That a lot of it's just anecdotal and just combining and seeing what I can for the short amount of times I was there. But, why this book is good, because a lot of that's revealed. A lot of the different parts, like alcoholism and just general human dynamics and not having enough money and being a little bit remote, those are kind of exemplified in a good way. So I think that's real. And also the sense, on a positive note, which I think is more important, the sense of community. Like when there's the big funeral and the guy comes for the grandma, and the guy comes with the dress and it's not even hers, and everyone laughs. Like, people don't do that. How many people usually are coming to funerals? Not very much, unless you're a very influential figure. So first of all, there's this dynamic going on. And so Rowdy is, experiencing some of this also, but Arnold's spirit is, when he makes a choice to go to Rearden, has been thrown into a split world. The world of his reservation and the world of his the world of the reservation and the world of his high school. And that, when I hear that, it seems like Alexie is going back to a very common trope and an effective one, which is kind of the mixed blood trope. And we've seen that through the 80s and 90s in Native American scholarship. That was the leading discourse. People like Louis Owens with his book Mixed Blood Messages, where, we'll just quote from that right now. He says, "Mixed bloods live in the ebbings of history, the full moon of the future, water lapping at the gravel and sandbar where spawning is possible. But the increasing situation of clear-cut history, a choking death." So it's one of the things that's happening here is that there's that separation. And in a lot of books, like Leslie Marmon Silko's Ceremony, Tayo is a mixed blood, and he has to figure out and mold both worlds. That's one of, I think, the common tropes of these mixed blood narratives is understanding both worlds, either adapting to the new world and then recovering ethnic history, or things of that nature. And that's what we see Arnold do on a very YA level, because once again, this is a YA novel basically, even though you can read it as an adult and gain a lot and it's funny. This is a YA novel, and if you are a high school student watching this right now, that is one of the things I would recommend maybe looking into, is people like Louis Owens and his commentary on this. Gerald Wiesner, author of one of the best novels in Native American lit, in my opinion, Bear Heart and The Craziest. He has a ton of stuff. And then let's see who else I have down. Kimberly Blazer and Elvira Putano. I'll list these names in the summary if you need to. Go look at some of their scholarship. They have a lot of good ideas. And once again, this is a controversial angle or frame to be viewing this novel from, because then in the late 90s, early 2000s, a new frame took place where it was more about, in writing and scholarship, about viewing authentic stories and what does it mean. I can't remember the exact name. It's not, I didn't write it down on the top of my head, but it's like something with literacy or like literature, like authentic. No, it's not like authentic literature, but talking about real experiences, not focusing on the mixed blood, because then that's integrating both worlds, but focusing on the authentic experience. Things such as like, even something like last year, or a couple years ago, There by Tommy Orange, books like that, or something by Natalie Diaz, or people like that, like integrating the full world into it. So I think that's all I have to say about that. And it's obvious that Arnold's spirit is going through that. He's in this split world, and in this split world, there are different things that are happening to him that are weird to him. And when we look at the differences between the Rearden and then I forgot Arnold's school, there is no difference really. No one's higher, no one's lower, because like I said, maybe the academics are better at Reardon, but the sense of community and sense of trust and the friendship and life skills that are being learned at Arnold's, the reservation high school are going to be a lot better. And then the people living there care more than the teachers maybe at Reardon. But then at Reardon, there's it's just all different. There's nothing really better. It's just different expressions of the kind of the same ebbs and flows. And that's one of the main revealing things. And I like this angle because this, and he puts it right here. Let's look. White Arnold has a bright future and a Ralph Lauren shirt and positive role models and hope. And then the Indian Arnold has a vanishing past, a family history of diabetes and cancer, and a bone-crushing reality. And I think it's an interesting thing that he's putting this in here. But once again, it's moving on one of these tropes that he knows is going to work. So, and from a conscious lens, a lot of us deal with this because, transcending race and other things, we can move into thinking where you've been an outsider before, and we are all outsiders to something else. And classism and stuff, it doesn't matter what race or gender you are. The real problem, we could say, is classism and the oppression that happens in that, and hierarchical thinking, because hierarchical thinking is what leads you to believe that one race is superior to the other, or one gender or one social class is better than the other. So this is examining some of these power structures that are going on within this white high school Reardon, and then with the Native American reservation community. So that is, once again, something that is very seminal to this text. And there was a lot of sad parts to this, because if we see this, is that when he makes this decision to leave, and this is one of the main messages of like a mixed blood narrative, is that when the person leaves, there's a lot of people that are angry at him. Chief, Sitting Bull, Tonto, Squaw Boy. Everyone was mad at Arnold. He got so much crap in his community. And I think that was exemplified in the first basketball game, that he's getting booed. And some of you guys may think that that's an exaggeration, but if you've ever lived in a small town and dealt with people in a small town, they take this stuff very seriously. And especially if it's sports, and if whatever the main sport is, if it's basketball or football, people go crazy, and people actually attack 15, 14, 16-year-old high school students and use tactics to manipulate them, which is very sad if you think about it. But these things happen in these communities because that's all they have. And Arnold actually talks about that when he beats them, his teammates look so sad because they're not going to be going to college. This is the last moment of glory for their life. They're not going to be going anywhere. This was the last moment. High school's over now. The big show's over, and they know what happens. They all know what happens. And then everyone on the team also knows what happens. It's like this silent social contract about what is going on. And I think it's kind of sad, actually, that's what's going on. So another thing I think that is super important to talk about on a deeper level about this novel is that at its core, it's a bildungsroman novel, and which means a coming of age story. I might have said that wrong. I always say it differently. It's the classic coming of age story. We have Arnold. He's a weakling. He's isolated, and he goes on a search by himself and leaving everything behind for redemption, to find himself, to find an ego. And this is another popular narrative. So once again, Alexie is choosing things that are popular and he knows are going to work. And he's also a very good writer. So if you are a writer and you choose very common used tropes or, styles, you can use those to elevate your writing and make sure that it's going to be a successful narrative. So, books like The Catcher in the Rye, The Lord of the Rings, To Kill a Mockingbird, Jane Eyre, Great Expectations, The Portrait of an Artist as a Young Man, all these texts encapsulate this and, take us on that journey. So obviously that's what's going on, but there's also the Native American personal narrative element to all this, that Arnold's spirit is going through his personal narrative is merging with his ethnic history and the shared stories of his community. There is death. There's death of his grandma and his dad's best friend, and even the death of his sister, and all these things that he's connecting back. And even this photo right here, if we look, like there is a lineage, and he's trying to find that. He's trying to find his way in the world, the merging of the two communities. And that's actually a very common theme in indigenous literature in general, all throughout the world, and with indigenous people of all races and of all types throughout, even thousands of years ago, that this person goes out on this journey, maybe a vision quest, and they're integrating. It's this journey of integration. And Arnold starts to do that through higher emotions also, and starts to develop a deeper relationship with his family when, like, for instance, his sister dies. So I think that's one thing to look at, everybody, because, it's the ego versus like the collective. If we need to make the dialectical, affirmation about the difference between these two styles. So I feel like this novel has a ton of potential for us to grow and for personal development, and from a spiritual point in terms of Arnold's courage and Arnold's push to self-imagine himself in a new way. Roberta Hill, in Immersed in Words, says, all human beings need to feel the integrity of their own imaginations. Our imaginative life is another expression of the earth. And I will have all the quotes from today below, but Arnold is stuck. Arnold doesn't know why he does it. It's this random teacher that beats him or hits him and is apologizing, that puts this idea in his head that he needs to go to the school. But when he's there, there's an expansion that happens, and the mending of the wounds between the reservation and Spokane, and just between Arnold and himself and what he's trying to do, is a cool process. And Alexie captures it in a great way, especially for the language and YA style that he's writing in. And I think that's what's most important, everybody, is that everybody feels good about their life. And you hear, throughout this whole thing, so much shaming that Arnold's having to go through. And especially with the trauma from his sister and his dad and Rowdy, because Rowdy is still stuck in this mentality. And Rowdy has been so abused that and so unloved that he only gives love to one person, and that's Arnold, because Arnold doesn't really challenge him. Arnold understands, and he draws in these comics, and there's so much potential in all of these kids, and it's not like it's wasted, because they all lead lives with kids and families and contribute to their community. I think that's one of the other narratives, like, oh, these kids could be so much if they left the reservation. Maybe they don't want to. Maybe they are making a contribution, and that gets into other Native American stuff, like the sovereign land issue and all these other things, and about self-determination and the ability to do that. And that is stunted by the government. That is stunted by our society. That is stunted for all of us, but more so, it's stunted for everybody. This is one of these things that's like, yeah, man, they're out on, Native Americans are oppressed and stunted, and their self-determination is stunted. So is ours. And this isn't even a political thing. This is transcending conservatism and liberalism. This is that we live in a society that has become so saturated, the hyper-real cycles so fast, with capitalist realism happening. There's no other solutions possible for us, and we get into this sense of cynicism, and Rowdy is in that cynicism, and that is a sad place to be. And so are Arnold's parents, because they're actually cool people. If you look, and it's kind of blurry, but his mom is an avid reader, and his dad is a great musician. And I view this as character flaws created by the structure. This isn't about, his dad being an alcoholic because he's just a deadbeat. It's about that his dad has experienced and is in a place of high probability for this to happen. In other places, there's much less probability, and that's because there are structural problems with the society, everybody. And there are power structures at play, and this novel actually encapsulates this concept a lot. So look into that, everybody. Look into Foucault and Anti-Oedipus with Deleuze and Guattari, and however you say his French name, and all of that stuff. And there's going to be a lot of that on the channel. If you were watching this within 6 months of me talking about this, there's already going to be something on that. Watch my series on capital realism that's coming out. There's a ton that goes into this. But instead of being trapped in romanticism, Arnold is pushing toward a liberation of his imagination. And when he finally finds that, when he finds a community, and a different community that values maybe his intellectual pursuits with his, I'm blanking on his friend's name. Excuse me. I know, I'm supposed to know this. You just read the book. That's why you're watching this. But the friend who's, the smart geek, he is expanding and he feels liberated. But at that moment is when finally he understands. He understands his grandma's funeral and his dad's best friend's funeral, and with that death, and with his sister's death. But what it all really means, and that he's a traveler. And that's what's so crazy about Rowdy, that this guy, he sees him as a traveler, and it's an archetype. And that's what's crazy, is that we assign these archetypes and we think that every single person needs to do this, needs to stay on the Spokane Indian Reservation. Here it is, everybody. Everyone needs to stay here. We think that everyone needs to leave here. I mean, that, they need to leave and get off the res or whatever, but they don't. And it's certain people, though, that need to leave the community to come back and be shakers, to be movers. Culture can't stand still and repeat. There has to be innovations. But if you send out people who are trustworthy, who are the best of the best, the people who won't be corrupted and who will come back and help, then you will have something that's a lot better community. And that's what's so crazy about mass travel and transit now, that cars can come in and come out, and the internet information can flow in to a secluded community, and it's not filtered by people. It's not filtered, and it could you could access this now from anywhere. Back in the day, where this is transcending indigenous people. I mean, 5,000 years ago in the Middle East, so a traveler goes out, some strong travelers go out and get some new technology and bring it back, and everybody's lives are improved. That's cool. And that's what Arnold is. And Rowdy can recognize that. And I think that's what Rowdy is, man. Rowdy is a leader. Rowdy is a person who stays and leads and pushes those people and helps people grow and challenges people, because Rowdy's not just going to be the jerk off his whole life. Maybe he will be, but people like that, who have a rough upbringing, if they can, not fall into drugs or alcohol, can really end up helping a lot of people. And I think it's just a really awesome thing. And the reconciliation at the end with Rowdy it was a beautiful scene, man. And it's cliche, it's YA, and we didn't keep score. Yeah, it's got its problems, but they moved on, and everybody grew up. People saying, I hate you and you suck and you white lover. All these things were worth it because the community is going to grow, because Arnold didn't betray them. And I think a lot of these tropes happen because there's betrayal that happens, that someone leaves and that someone they cherish, like a community has a person and they're a cherished person, but then they leave for something else. And now all that potential and all that love and all that effort is now wasted. And then all that's left is emptiness. And I think that's what they were thinking about, that Arnold was maybe going to do. But I think that by showing up and trying to be his friends and continuing to communicate them and just growing up in general, that Rowdy and Arnold are now going to step into leadership roles in their communities in different ways. And there are people in the community who are still making fun of Arnold, who are older and are being mean to him. And those are the people who aren't going to be helping, because one reason why a lot of people leave a community is that it's hard to come back. They don't want to deal with all the pressure. A lot of people get caught in this with religion, that they want to leave this religion, or they leave a religion, but they're so judged when they come back that they don't want to come back, and they just excommunicate themselves. And then both sides become bitter. Then the other side becomes bitter at the side that took the person away. You see this all the time with, just like very strict religions that are non-inclusionary. So that's another part of this, is just there's a lot of emptiness. There's a lot of boredom. Arnold's bored. This is even I shouldn't say this is the late 90s because there's email, so this is probably mid 2000s, but there's email and stuff. But back then, you know, in 2005, there wasn't huge, massive video games, and they didn't have the money to. They had comics, and they were climbing trees. This is a photo of the Spokane Indian Reservation, everybody, just for you know, just beautiful place, man. Like, and yeah, I think that's the gist of my review today for everybody. I would recommend this book. If you've made it through this review, let me know what you think in the comments below. Tell me your thoughts. What did I get wrong? What did I get right? What should I have added? What didn't I need to add? Whatever you guys want, let's talk. I'm a friend who is always here to talk about books and great ideas. This is another Conscious Book Review, everybody. Hopefully one of many this year. I'm trying to get a lot done. I'm not going to say the number just yet. Maybe I already said the number, but I'm going to try to get a lot done this year, everybody. So stay tuned. Daily videos every day this year. Multiple videos, hopefully, of personal development, writing motivation, whatever you guys need. I'm here for you guys. Peace.